Yeah, I agree. I'm sure there'll be some Baldur's Gate 3 in my future as well. Graham and I know we're
Join us, Cam.
yes. Join the CRPG fanboys, as it's well deserved. So it's a good game. Hey there, welcome back to the As I Understand It podcast, the discussion podcast about careers, young adulthood, and the evolving world that we live in. I'm your host, Cameron Geddes.
And I'm your co-host, Graham Nesbitt.
And today we're very fortunate to bring on two very special guests. The first of them is my former college roommate, Matthew Dickerson. You want to say hi, Matthew?
Hello.
And the other is my very favorite guest we have on the show, which is my girlfriend, Olivia Wood.
Hi.
Before we get started on our topics today, we'll invite our guests to say a few words about themselves. I'll go first. My name is Cameron Geddes. I'm 24 and graduated from Hope College in May 2021 with degrees in economics and global studies. I'm employed as a food service data analyst with the market research firm Circana, and I currently live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I enjoy like weightlifting, playing video games, stuff like that. Graham, would you like to go first?
Yeah, my name is Graham Nesbitt. I'm 25, graduated from Wheaton College, and currently work as a substance abuse counselor in the Rockford region.
Cool. Thanks, Graham. You want to go next, Matthew?
Hi, I'm Matthew Dickerson. I'm 25. I am currently just finishing up my final year as a master's student at Purdue University in Power and Energy Electrical Engineering.
Nice. Thanks, Matthew. Finally, how about you, Olivia?
I'm Olivia. I'm 24, and I'm a second-year graduate student at UW-Milwaukee doing clinical mental health counseling.
Thanks, Olivia. All right. Now that everyone is a little acquainted with our guests, we can get into our first topic of the day. And that is, what is your ideal 5-minute mental health self-care routine? So I have, as usual, some stats here. The first is from the Mental Health First Aid, which is from the National Council for Mental Wellbeing. And they say, quote, engaging in a self-care routine has been clinically proven to reduce or eliminate anxiety or depression, reduce stress, increase happiness, and more. It can help you adapt to changes, build strong relationships, and recover from setbacks. In a national survey, Americans cited benefits of self-care as enhanced self-confidence, so 64% of respondents, increased productivity, 67% of respondents, happiness, 71% of respondents. From a physical health perspective, self-care also reduces heart disease, stroke, and cancer. Olivia, if you want to go first on this topic.
Yeah, I think the physical aspect of it is really important. I would say if you only have 5 minutes, taking your physical needs into consideration, asking yourself, am I hungry? Am I tired? If you had a long day at work, kind of analyzing your physical needs first. And I think that kind of just gives you more clarity to work on, mental health needs, as well as, offers you a chance to do a 5-minute full body stretch or 3 really deep breaths. I think that deep breathing can really be helpful in relaxing your body and activating the parasympathetic nervous system to kind of relax you. So I think that either stretching, deep breathing, kind of getting a snack or getting a glass of water or something like that, if you only have 5 minutes, can be helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
Again.
Yeah. So Matthew, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I just think of 5 minutes, even maybe stretch it out to 10 or 15, but
Yeah.
even around 3 p.m., just taking a nap and doing something like getting off, as you said, getting up and going for that water. Or I've gotten into a routine to kind of stop what I'm doing, go rest on the couch, just kind of disengage for a little bit around. And for me, it's 3, maybe for others, it's 4 or 2, but around that kind of point in the day where you're just after lunch, you're a little bit tired. I find that that's really helpful for me to kind of just take that time.
Yeah. I'm a big nap guy. I think naps are very underrated and a great way to balance yourself, bring yourself back to normal after just a lot of stress or hard work, like nothing wrong with a good nap. Graham, I'm sure you got something to say about that.
Yeah, just with what you guys were talking about already, like, taking care of kind of physical needs, whether that's taking a nap, getting something to drink or eat. I think probably what I would add in addition to that is I found like getting your body relaxed as best as you can, especially when
Mm.
stress or anxiety is high. So I'd recommend, finding ways to either get warm, whether it's putting on a nice, cozy
Mhm.
sweatshirt, getting some blankets, getting something like that so your body can kind of, ease into that. The second thing after you've done that, what I would recommend, get a piece of paper, pull up the notes app on your phone, just write out everything that's stressing you at that moment.
Mhm.
A lot of the times it can build up in your head and it doesn't have anywhere to go. You're stressed and you might have some idea why, but it's all kind of floating around in there. So I'd recommend just write it all down. That way you're taking it out of your head, you're putting it down on a piece of paper or something you can see in front of you, and then you can start to look at it and work on it.
Yeah, Olivia, I know you've talked to me before a lot about like note taking and
Oh
journaling, like the
yeah.
importance
Oh
of it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, huge. Very important to just take care of that, get a few minutes set aside specifically for those things. So
Mhm.
yeah, I totally agree. Well, maybe we'll touch more on that a little bit. I'm sure that'll come up again, but we might as well go on to our next question. What are some ways to save energy around the house? And this can also, we can broaden this a little bit into like green energy and things like that too. I think that's a big part of the discussion now is how households can save energy by being green. So statistic I have on that is according to escapewaste.com. They're a blog on reducing plastic trash and other forms of waste around the household. They cite that the average U.S. home needs 10,982 kilowatt hours of power a year and pays approximately $2,200 on utility bills. And they state that over 60% of U.S. household energy consumed is actually going to waste. So, if I'm sure if it's anywhere near that amount, that's a very frightening statistic, and we'd like to all bring that down if possible. Matthew, our resident electrical engineer, will have you respond first.
Sure. Yeah. No, Kim, this is a really interesting question because it's one of those where you don't quite think about maybe on a personal level, like, oh, energy is such a massive thing, but each, one of those where each small thing you do does matter. And it's kind of what you hear as a kid: turn off a light when you're not in the room, right?
Yeah,
Turn down your heating and unplug appliances. I think there's a lot to say with just, does it need to be on? And I think a lot of times you'll find that perhaps it doesn't. As you said, it gets wasted, and maybe you don't always need to have your phone charging and your battery on your laptop at 100%. So yeah, I think there's something to be said about that, but also with the kind of implementation of electric vehicles and now these at-home battery storage
yeah,
chargers, there's this really interesting, and solar panels, you know, they're what we call distributed and dispatchable loads. So essentially what's happening is, we have a lot of places on around the electricity grid. Homes are becoming not only loads but also sources of energy, right? So
yeah.
this is a really interesting, it's a little bit of a problem, but it's a good problem to have. We want to have more power, but that's kind of an interesting uh, kind of thing or situation where we're seeing in the electrical engineering field of how do we manage having these distributed loads and sources, all of these solar panels. And I think that's a big thing too. Putting solar panels on your house, getting some batteries, you can really help with generating, if you want to take up these green power sources, you can help with this by putting it into your home and implementing it on your own individual level.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And that made me think of there's this article I read a while ago on sort of the economics of having large scale renewable sources. And like you're saying, sometimes something that in the long run is very good can raise some unique problems in the short run. I know that this article specifically mentioned cases where grids had a large source of renewable energy, and at peak periods, at peak energy generation periods, the cost of electricity was almost nothing. And you'd think like, well, that's a good thing. And it is, but it also from like a business perspective raises questions of, okay, you have something that is very profitable, um, and other sources of energy are hard to come by. But then when the renewables are at max like efficiency and energy is super cheap, like how do you price that? Because it's super cheap in one time of day and very expensive in another time of day. Like what's the ways to sell that? And I don't have the answer to that, but I'm sure that does raise a lot of interesting questions for the future. Graham, would you like to respond on saving energy around the household or, some of these green
Yeah,
related things?
kind of adding on what Matthew had talked about earlier, like unplugging devices when you're not in the room, stuff like that. I have an Alexa at home, and I make use of the automated home routines, things like that.
Yeah.
You can program it so certain times a day it'll automatically turn off your devices or keep the temperature of your home low when you're not around and doing that, and that way can not only be a bit greener but also save electricity costs. So
Yeah.
if you have one, have the opportunity to get your hands on one, I think it's a very useful tool.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Olivia, you have anything you want to add on that?
I would just kind of resonate with what everybody else said, like making sure that you're not leaving lights on, unplugging things when they don't need to be plugged in or you're not using them. Yeah, I'd say that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All right, let's go into our next segment then. And this is one that Matthew specifically and I have a lot of interesting experience with, which I'm sure we have some, well, I'm sure everyone has some interesting thoughts about roommates, positive and negative experiences. So we'll keep it positive. Matthew and I always had a good positive roommate experience, so I think we're good there. Um, so the next question will be, what are some good practices for interacting with roommates slash housemates? So according to spareroom.com, which is a roommate finding website, it's a service of sorts. Data from the #1 roommate finder, Spare Room, plug in themselves there, reveals that there has been a huge rise in homeowners taking in roommates. Comparing January 2024 with January 2021, there has been a 167% increase in new people taking on roommates. So definitely an interesting and somewhat sobering statistic in some ways, but I'm sure that there are a lot of new roommate situations out there this year, and people who don't may not have experienced living with roommates before or aren't sure what the best tips and tricks are. So I'll have Graham start with this. And Graham, you had roommates in college, is that right?
Yeah, so my situation was, maybe a little unique for this question. I was in college 4 years. First 2 years I did have roommates. However, they did live nearby, so the amount of time that they actually spent with me in the room was maybe not as much as say the standard roommate pairing where they're coming from different ends of the country. Um, and then my last year of college, I lived in a house, had different housemates. So maybe I might go a bit more into kind of that situation. What I would say is, with the experience I have had, uh, and I'll give one example, my freshman year of what I did not do right, and maybe how to do that better. My roommate would, we're both gamers, both enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he would, yeah, maybe play a little bit later than would be preferred, like 3 a.m. and without headphones, so it'd be a bit loud, and sleeping would be a bit of a challenge. From that,
Graham and I playing some co-op games together and getting all riled up.
absolutely. Um, when you do have to live with someone, what I would say is be aggressive when not aggressive. Don't punch them or anything, but be aggressive when you first meet them on, good times to talk, good
Mm,
communication. Maybe set aside a time once each week just to check up on, hey, how's the living situation going? Are you good? Any concerns? Things like that. If you have a good, strong communication from the start, it's just, you might want to have the temptation to just comply with whatever's happening to just make sure everything's smooth. Yeah, I would just say get those hard things out of the way up front. That way it's going to help both of you in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. I'll say, speaking for Matthew and I, so Matthew and I have had some interesting roommates. Matthew was my roommate the first year of school, and then it's the fourth year, right? So
Yeah, senior year.
yeah, so we have 1 full year of experience, and then we were one of a couple roommates in our fourth year. And when we had other roommates too, I had a different one my second year, and for my third year, I had a separate roommate for a period before COVID happened, and we all went remote. So we've had positive and negative experiences. I would say that one thing I learned just from living with Matthew is your schedules are going to be very different. So I was an econ student, and Matthew was doing engineering. So we were coming and going at different times of the day, and just setting expectations as far as like privacy goes, as well as how to just comfortably move out and about, making sure that no one like loses their key. That was a big thing. You got docked quite a bit of money if you didn't keep track of your key at school. So just communicating about those things was essential. And I'd say also too, just like finding things to do outside of just being roommates. Like Matthew and I became very good friends, doing other things, going to different on-campus events and whatnot. So I think you have to really try to force yourself to see roommates as positive opportunity rather than someone who you have to work around in order to keep doing your thing. And going into that with that mindset, whether or not the other person is receptive to it, I think makes a big difference, and that is what lets you set your best foot forward. So yeah, I'm sure Matthew, if you want to comment a bit on that.
Yeah, yeah. I really like what you said about all of it. But one that spoke to me in particular was just kind of setting what the space is going to be. What is, your room? Is it a place where you just sleep? Is it a place where you study and eat? Is it a place where you party? And getting that, as Graham said beforehand, getting that through and talking that out at the beginning is paramount, because it certainly can lead to some miscommunications and some pain points later on if it's not talked about. Luckily, I think Cam and I might know some things that happened later in our years, but we in our freshman year got pretty lucky. I think we had a pretty similar kind of space. So yeah.
Yeah, it was a good time. A lot of people, fun fact about that, a lot of people thought in our freshman year that Matthew and I were like brothers or cousins or something, which is funny because we're like our hair colors are very different and stuff like that. But yeah, that was a amusing aspect of that. Olivia, I know your roommate experience has been primarily just limited to living with your family, but I'm sure that you have some, if you can chime in from the perspective of family members as roommates, I'm sure there's a lot of people in that situation as well.
Yeah, has its challenges for sure. I mean, you don't have to pay rent for most people living at home, but it can be tricky. Like the dynamics of working with family, like living with your family, as well as having to kind of navigate those like roommate issues, like you left your dishes in the sink, or I'm not taking care of this towel on the floor in the bathroom, stuff like that. Like, and I think it's tricky. It can be different, but there's also a little bit more room to like be honest and have that good communication because they're your family. So yeah, I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think that about does it in terms of overt questions. Oh, one like extra bonus thing is when it comes to video games, because I know the four of us to some degree enjoy video games. I was thinking about this earlier with the electricity question. I'm sure a lot of people would sort of contend onto that especially with that stat of how much of US household energy goes to waste. Um, you'd want to feel bad about that. I think there's definitely a temptation to feel guilty, and it's not entirely misplaced. But I would also note too that especially with the rise from working from home and a lot of people having very digital-esque hobbies. I mean, this is certainly one of them. This is an example of something that uses a lot of electricity. As long as you're using it properly and just being conscientious, I think that doesn't mean that it's wasted at all. I think that means you're using it, putting it to good use, as long as, you're actually paying attention when you have things turned on. And I think when you have hobbies too, this sort of ties back to the self-care aspect, that question. As long as what you're doing is active and you're using things in the right way and being conscientious, I think that makes a big difference. Because I also say too, like with a lot of digital hobbies, a lot of times that's a form of like self-care, like being able to provide an outlet for just entertainment and stepping away from things for a little bit. There's nothing wrong with doing that as long as you're actually, like using your computer when you've got it turned on and you're not having your screen set super bright when you don't need them to, and so on. So yeah, that's just one extra tidbit I had thinking about that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to comment a little bit here, just to say, like, I'm an electrical engineer. My job is to make it so that you can do your hobbies. Uh, don't stop doing what you love. I'm a big gamer. I love, all the big games, Baldur's Gate 3 coming
yeah,
out here. Really enjoying that. And I think that yeah, those computers things can use up a lot of energy, but just be smart about it. As Cam said, if you're not gaming, turn your gaming computer off. But if you are, do it, and don't feel bad about doing something you love.
yeah, I agree. I'm sure there'll be some Baldur's Gate 3 in my future as well. Graham and I know we're
Join us, Cam.
yes. Join the CRPG fanboys, as it's well deserved. So it's a good game. I think that'll about do it for today's episode. I just want to thank my guests here, Olivia, and as well as Matthew Dickerson. Thanks for coming by, and of course my fabulous co-host Graham Nesbitt. So very pleased that you're all able to make it, and I think this is a very nice, pleasant episode of the podcast, which we finally have named As I Understand It. And you can expect that on YouTube, Apple Podcasts in the future, whenever they finish processing the requests that I put in, and as well as on various social media and LinkedIn, wherever people want to share it. So with that, episode's come to an end. You'll expect us back in about 2 weeks. Graham and I will get some new exciting guests on here for you, and you might see some familiar faces in the future. So thanks for coming by, and appreciate it. Take care.